I'm talking Firm album for you, baby. Firm album. So, The Firm, for those who aren't aware, is a hip hop supergroup from the mid 90s consisting of Nas, AZ, Foxy Brown, and initially Cormega and then Nature. Um, they then released an album October 1997, 25 years ago, is why it's apt to look at the album today. And needless to say, it didn't set the world on fire. It was considered a commercial and critical disappointment for everyone involved, and basically everyone who was involved with the album pretty much either never recovered or took a while to recover from it. So I thought it'd be interesting just to go over it and, perhaps have a look at what went wrong, or if it's even as bad as many people thought it was at the time, given 25 years of retrospect, things perhaps have changed. So, here we are, there's on the Firm. So you see Nas, AZ, Foxy Brown, and Nature, not Cormega. Now, the reason for Cormega's exclusion from the album, I don't know if it's ever been completely clarified. It's supposed to be, from what I've seen, a mixture of falling outs over the creative direction of the Firm with Nas and contract issues with the manager of the group, Steve Stout, who's Nas' manager at the time as well, and who helped sort of bring the group together and then brought in Nature to replace Cormega. So, as a super group, and kind of it follows the kind of mafioso theme that a lot of hip hop was doing at the time. There's some of Nas's own "It Was Written" album, which was largely produced by the Trackmasters, who heavily produced this album as well, along with Dr. Dre, who is sort of the kind of an unofficial fifth member of the group, as the album was released under his own, at that time, fledgling label, Aftermath, as kind of like the first proper release after his own compilation the year prior. And yeah, it was kind of supposed to be a bit of a launching pad for the label. And so Dr. Dre produces a fair amount on here, alongside Chris the Glove Taylor, and also Melman appears to produce with Dre briefly. I know that's the official start of their collaboration, but I don't think they produced together before this, so I think that this is the starting point of their partnership. So yeah, all the other tracks are basically produced by the Trackmasters, except for lead single Firm Biz, which is produced by LES, another Nas companion, and sort of a Trackmasters companion as well. So yeah, the style is kind of similar to a lot of that mid 90s mafioso style, with a mixture of like kind of the jiggy era, bad boy kind of style as well. In terms of like the mix of production, considering Dre and Trackmasters kind of produce about equally half of the album each. Dre's stuff tends to be his, at this time, quite typical style of his quite an like dark, eerie West Coast sound. And the Trackmasters kind of go for a bit more of a like sample funky based, again, like jiggy style, but there are differences as we go through it. Like for example, Firm Family, which features Dr. Dre on it, features a much more lavish style production, whereas some of the later Token Pone Trackmaster tracks aren't as, they're a bit more stripped back and a bit more street in a way. So I guess one of the main issues with the album, the production often gets criticised. I don't think the production itself is generally fine. There's no real bad beats on there or anything. Perhaps it could have dived a bit more into the New York street style that Nas and AZ in particular had kind of perfected earlier on in their careers. But the production itself isn't particularly bad. As a group, it feels very strange because as a way of introducing this great new hip hop supergroup, it feels kind of bizarre. I think this is the main issue I take with it. As a four piece, doing three verse songs generally, they are kind of going to fall into the issue of never all featuring on the song together, and that's true. There isn't a single song on here that I believe that features all four members of the group. The closest we get are sort of like the major tracks, like Firm Biz, Phone Tap, Firm Fiasco, which feature three of the members together. Firm Fiasco, the intro song, features AZ, Nas, and Foxy Brown over a very slinky Dr. Dre beat. Phone Tap is a cool concept track of people of the feds tapping in to the phones of the members to try and get information on their activity, and so we get a bit of a conversation between largely AZ and Nas under their kind of Escobar and Sosa mafioso personas, and Nature appears a bit for the end as well to add a bit more to, I suppose. But it's largely a collaboration between Nas and AZ, and the lead single Firm Biz, very glossy track taken from the Tina Marie Square Biz song, is AZ, Foxy Brown, and Nas again, featuring Dawn Robinson on the chorus, who was also supposed to be a new rising star on the Aftermath label. Nothing really happened to her after this album in terms of her relationship with Dr. Dre, at least. So whether or not the album's failure played into that, I don't know for certain, but that's kind of another casualty of this album in a way. But yeah, apart from those songs, every other track features either just one of the members or just like two of them, or is a collaboration between one person and someone completely different. The amount of guest features that are on this album for a supergroup trying to establish a cohesive unit of four people is very bizarre. So we already have the aforementioned Firm Family, which is back and forth between Nature and Dr. Dre. Again, Dre is kind of a member of the group, so it makes sense for him to be on there, and he does the chorus for Phone Tap as well, so his vocal presence is going to be felt on the album anyway. There's Firm All Stars featuring Pretty Boy, who is the younger brother of Foxy Brown, who appears on the song with him, and would later help produce Nas's Hate Me Now. Pretty Boy is a fine rapper, seems very heavily to be influenced by Mace, but again, when you're trying to establish a new four-piece group, just featuring a song that's basically half one of the members and half of someone else is a strange call. Very similarly for later on in the album, the last couple of songs, I'm Leaving is a collaboration between Nature again and Noriega, who was, I believe, at one point touted to be part of the firm. The list of people who are said to have at one point been considered to be part of the firm is actually quite interesting. Mobb Deep, Mary J. Blige, 50 Cent apparently were all at one time considered. I'm pretty sure Noriega was as well. And again, it's a fine collaboration between the pair of them, but again, it's a song that's split between a singular member of the group and someone who isn't part of the group. Throw Your Guns, the closing track, featuring Half a Mil, again, is literally split between him and AZ. And in fact, I think Half a Mil actually does technically more than AZ on the song. I believe AZ only has one verse and Half a Mil has two verses. It's fine to be showcasing these other talents, all of whom are decent enough rappers, but the album is about the firm. It's not about these other artists. At least on the track Desperados with Cannabis gets a lengthy first verse, but the other verses between AZ and Nature following him are at least enough to match it, and it doesn't feel too out of place having this guest artist among the other artists. There isn't a singular song that features every member of the group. In terms of each member's appearance, they all kind of split evenly their appearances on this album, which is to say not a lot at all. I think Nas and AZ and Nature, I think, have 6 verses on an 18-track album. Nas and Foxy Brown have 5 verses on an 18-track album. Dre mentions one of the issues with the album was they didn't have a lot of time to record it, and Foxy missed lots of flights for the recording sessions, so was only able to be there for a limited amount of time, which is why she appears on the album so infrequently. But everyone else does on the album as well. Everyone kind of becomes a guest on their own album, which is just very, very bizarre. The fact that there weren't more collaborations between them is strange, because the collaborations they do have on here, for the most part, work really well. Hardcore is a back and forth between Nas and Foxy Brown, which sounds really good between the pair of them. And this is pretty much the executive decision. AZ, Nas, and Nature. Everything else is just a singular track, pretty much. The middle part of the album kind of becomes Foxy's part of the album, which is bizarre considering how much she missed of the recording sessions. But from Thermal Stars to Fuck Somebody Else and Hardcore, she's featured pretty heavily in this middle section of the album. Again, not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but then where does everyone else feature on the album? Um, Other notable tracks include 5 Minutes to Flush, which is a nature solo track about essentially the cops about to burst in and take so to hide, flush all the crack cocaine they has down the toilet in the 5 minutes, which is a fine concept. The chorus sort of counts down the 5 minutes, similar to the Houdini 5 Minutes of Funk song, which the beat is sort of taken from. With the chorus, which I'm not sure if it's actually performed by Roger Troutman, but it certainly has that talk box effect on it. But yeah, and so it's like the song itself. Nature is a qualified enough rapper, but he kind of the situation gets resolved reasonably quickly. I think, and like the countdown goes with each moment of the chorus rather than the minutes themselves. I think it would have been a bit more effective if it had literally been a real-time depiction of these 5 minutes rather than just kind of finishing that scenario within the first verse, and then the next verses are kind of like the aftermath, no pun intended, of it. We also another minor guest appearance in form of Untouchable, which is sort of an interlude. Again, Nas only appears on the intro, and then the rest of the song is taken up by Wizard, who, from the sounds of it, I believe would become G-Wiz or Wiz of the Bravehearts. So, again, a nice showcase of rising talent, but what of the actual talent who are supposed to be over this album? This sort of concepts of the firm and like the concept elements of the album isn't really fleshed out too far. Apart from the kind of intro tracks which set up the firm group, they then basically just disperse into their own stories which have no real relevancy to everyone else. So it's 18 tracks in total. A lot of them are actually intros leading in to tracks such as Phone Tap, the 5 Minutes to Flush, Fuck Somebody Else, and they all make sense for the songs that are leading into, at least. But again, it kind of it never really gives that much to the actual firm concepts that they have for the album. So while it's not a bad album necessarily, all the performers on there are good. AZ in particular has pretty much a standout verse every single time he does appear. Nas's stuff is good, if perhaps a little bit watered down from some of his more lyrical stuff. Foxy's stuff is kind of the same generally as her own material. She, when she is on here, she fits reasonably well into the album. And Nature again is a decent rapper, is about as good as the rest of them, but doesn't really do enough on here to necessarily qualify his placement. For a 4-piece group, it may as well have just been Nas, Foxy, and AZ as a 3-piece to try and keep it all cohesive of 3 people doing a verse each. On the majority of the songs, at least, if you can't get everyone there for every single song, then I understand. But yeah, it just doesn't make much sense that everyone just keeps disappearing on their own album. And I feel this is more of the issue rather than the production of the album itself. So yeah, again after this, so Nas kind of had a bit of a balance of trying to gain commercial viability, and then kind of ends up just regaining the old Nas with Stillmatic, and has kind of been a bit more critically accepted since then. Foxy, again, kind of seamlessly transitioned in between these parts of her career. This album didn't really do that much effect to her, more than her own problems kind of seemingly derailed her afterwards, a few years later. But say this album didn't really affect that as much, I don't feel. AZ kind of just went back to being Nas's sidekick, and sort of for someone who kind of unfortunately wasn't really going to achieve that much commercial success by himself, there was kind of no hope for him after this. Similarly with Nature, who didn't even have the privilege of being Nas's sidekick before this album, and so he was definitely done after this. They've all released stuff afterwards, but no one sort of has had real commercial. So in terms of Nas is the only one who's really had any commercial success after this album. Well, Foxy as well, but it wasn't really sustained. Dr. Dre also felt the brunt of this. It would take him a while, like a year and a half almost, before Aftermath would finally get taken seriously as a label with the release of Eminem's Slim Shady LP. Trackmasters kind of continued on, but this was around the peak of their production prowess. So they've continued on as producers, but increasingly less so. And say other people involved with this album, such as Dawn Robinson, kind of just fizzled out after this. Noriega has had somewhat of a up and down, but at least somewhat of a commercial career after this. Cannabis was a hot prospect at one time, and then kind of fizzled out through more of his own issues rather than anything else. Half a Mil was unfortunately murdered a few years after this album, and sort of never really gained any commercial success. Pretty Boy kind of disappeared. It was only really around to appear on Foxy Brown's stuff and to do a bit of production, largely for Foxy. But sort of never really reached any heights as a rapper or as a producer, for that matter. Wizard again became part of the Bravehearts, which had some success. I'm not going to say that this album necessarily tainted everyone, and say it was a complete commercial failure. It debuted at number one on the Billboard, but it did kind of just dissipate after that, because everyone heard it and decided that it wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be. The proper firm with Cormega instead of Nature have reunited on Nas's King's Disease album, and maybe we'll hear more from them in the future. It could be interesting if they were to collaborate with Dre and the Trackmasters again, and maybe see if they get it right this time. But I mean, they're all a bit older, a lot older now, and whether they'll be able to hit the same tone that they could have at this time, I'm not sure. But again, the album itself isn't bad. It's just confusing, and yeah, could have been laid out a lot better, as a better way of showcasing this group who, were a strong unit when, given the opportunity to show they would work cohesively together. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Firm album. Do check it out if you get the chance to. I mean, it is a bit of a difficult one to find online. Some streaming services do have it, so I don't know if they've now decided to, well, in recent years decided to make it more available, because I certainly know at one point it was very difficult to properly listen to. But yeah, it's certainly worth checking out, even if it doesn't necessarily bear too many repeat listens. And it is kind of a nice sign of, what could have been if all the pieces had fallen together properly. It's interesting to think about. But yeah, until next time, I will see you around.